Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I was going to introduce Rebecca Todd. For over 30 years, Rebecca has advised organizations, individuals, and businesses in matters related to environmental, educational, contractual, employment, and nonprofit management. Prior to joining the Connecticut River Conservancy in October 2023, she served as general counsel for Antioch University, as Associate Attorney General in the Office of the Attorney General in Washington in the Education and Ecology Divisions, and litigated cases for the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund, Incorporated, now Earth Justice, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, Incorporated, related to the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, and hazardous waste laws. Rebecca also teaches environmental law, legal advocacy, and other subjects nationally and internationally. In addition to these professional accomplishments, Rebecca grew up in the Connecticut River watershed, has raised a family while stewarding by the way, this is my addition. I got to see their farmhouse this summer. Beautiful farmhouse along the river in New Hampshire, and is cultivating a new passion for the sport of rowing. Very nice. So, Rebecca, talk to us.
Oh yeah, the lights did magically go down. Can you hear me? I did turn my mic on. Yes. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you so much for being here. I want to tell you a story this morning, not of the actions of a few uninformed or rapacious individuals that have resulted in the loss of habitat, the loss of fish, and pollutant loading from the Connecticut River into Long Island Sound, creating our famous dead zone. But I want to tell you the much bigger story of the actions of many who have helped improve the environmental quality of the Connecticut River. So to situate us, I want to take you back to 1979. Some of you weren't even around in 1979, but I was. Becky Todd was in high school, working in a laboratory, like many in this fabulous building, and I saved enough to buy myself a secondhand, factory second canoe. And I was thrilled, although I knew that I could not take my canoe as a platform for swimming in the Connecticut River. You did not in 1979 swim in the Connecticut River. Well, fast forward 45 years, and this fall, one of the board members for the Connecticut River Conservancy was the first known person to swim the entire length of the Connecticut River, 410 miles. So CRC was just one of many actors that helped with that transformative moment to going from being an unfishable, unswimmable river in 1979 when I was out there paddling in my little beat up canoe to this past fall when somebody swam the entire length of the river. So who is the Connecticut River Conservancy? We are a small but mighty environmental organization, and we take as our jurisdiction the entire Connecticut River watershed. This is a picture of about half of our staff, and the picture in the far right is our sweet little 1813 building in downtown Greenfield, Massachusetts, where we have our headquarters. We also have offices in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Connecticut. So we do a lot of stuff. We have lots of really interesting programs. We plant native trees and shrubs to help with riparian area restoration. We do dam removals, removing defunct, obsolete, we call them obsolete river obstructions. And we harness brigades of people to help us remove aquatic invasive species. We work on improving migratory fish passage in the river and tributaries. We have 4 river stewards, one for each of our 4 watershed states, who are in state houses lobbying and working on the relicensing of hydroelectric facilities. We promote recreational access for folks. We do water quality monitoring from northern New Hampshire and Vermont all the way to the mouth of Long Island Sound. And we do what we call community science, which most other folks refer to as citizen science. So the Connecticut River is an amazing array of ecosystems. It was named after the Pequot word Connecticut, which means the long tidal river or by the long tidal river. So what I find interesting about that, amongst other things, is that the state of Connecticut was named for the river and not the other way around. And I've had people in Connecticut say to me, well, what do you call this river up north? Right? It's still the same Connecticut River. The river is New England's largest watershed, 7.2 million acres of land, 410 miles, and the largest single contributor of fresh water to Long Island Sound. 70% of the fresh water entering Long Island Sound comes from the Great River, as it used to be called by colonial interests. So the river has played a key role in our understanding of our world. Indigenous peoples have lived in the Connecticut River watershed for at least 14,000 years. That's over 550 generations. And we have a great deal to learn from our tribal colleagues about what it means to inhabit a place, right? How many of us have lived for multiple generations in one place, right? Not many of us, and certainly not many of us 550 generations in one place. So some Abenaki people call the Connecticut River the long living being. And I just wonder out loud with all of you, how might our relationship with the river and this ecosystem have been formed if we thought of it as the long living being instead of a transportation route or a way to manage our industrial wastes or our sewage wastes? Anyway, an interesting thought experiment. And we can trace the history of conquest and transport and agricultural development and industrialization all along the banks of the Connecticut River. It's a fascinating historical lesson as well as environmental lesson for us. So why do we do the work that we do? Well, and this shows from the far northern part of the watershed through the mouth of the watershed, through urban areas, and through areas where the Connecticut River was used for hydroelectric power. You can see a dam here, and you can see a power canal here, used to power our industrial processes. So we do the work we do. We try to preserve and protect our little corner of the planet to help save other creatures and ourselves. So environmental psychologists tell us that if we damage the exterior world, we also damage our interior world. And conversely, I like to think that when we improve the exterior world, we are also improving our interior world. So enough about psychology. How about some science, since that's what many of us are interested in. So the Accipenser brevirostrum is the short-nosed sturgeon, which is a federally listed endangered species present in the Connecticut River watershed. It's also a state-listed endangered species for many of the states in the watershed. And we asked the question, are there short-nosed sturgeon present in the midsection of the Connecticut River watershed? So the Connecticut River is heavily dammed, and the midsection has a series of hydroelectric facilities that cause, as you might imagine, significant adverse effects on fish and the passage of aquatic organisms in general, water quality, bank stability, recreation, access, lots of significant impacts with significant benefits. We do get hydroelectric power from these facilities. So the Connecticut River Conservancy has been involved in the relicensing of these hydroelectric facilities for 13 years. And the last round of the FERC licenses for these facilities, the licenses last 50 years. So the licenses for these facilities expired 13 years ago, and we've been involved ever since then to try and get a license for the next, we're hoping, less than 50 years. In any event, we've been actively involved in that, and we have heard for years anecdotal evidence of the presence of the short-nosed sturgeon in areas upstream of these hydroelectric dams. And the hydroelectric facilities have disputed this, but we have been working with tribal representatives and anglers who've said, no, we know that there are short-nosed sturgeon there. So we decided, let's see if we can do some fundraising, get some money, and do environmental DNA analysis to see if the short-nosed sturgeon is present in the area where the hydroelectric facilities say it isn't, and therefore we don't have to manage for this federally endangered species. So, environmental DNA, you probably all know, is a method of detecting the presence of a species by capturing DNA from the environment, extracting it, purifying it, and analyzing it. So life is messy, right? Having had 2 kids, I can tell you firsthand that we shed hair, we leave little bits of fingernails around, and even sometimes against family rules, we spit, and worse. So same thing for fish. They leave little pieces of themselves all over. And we use eDNA to allow for the detection of rare species like this. It's also helpful for the early detection of invasive species. So we luckily have a PhD fisheries biologist on our staff. All of you who are thinking where you might land in your professional careers, do think of the Connecticut River Conservancy. And we did eDNA sampling first for sea lamprey. Easy, we had a backpack filtration device and determined that sea lamprey were present in lots of tributaries where we hadn't had verified kits for them in the past. The short-nosed sturgeon is a slightly different matter because they are deep dwelling species. So you want to sample the water where you think they're going to be, right? Common sense. So we had to do some, as you can see here, some deep water dives. And we went to the deepest areas we could think where they might be with suitable habitat, and we sampled those areas. So what did we find? So we, our eDNA had a positive lab sample. So the Conti lab is, they have wonderful tanks, and we sampled a tank that had a female sturgeon in it, and we got a positive hit, right? And then we sampled areas in the river where we know we have sturgeon, in Sunderland. And got positive hits there. And then the red, which corresponds to the red on the map, are the areas that we sampled where we were told by the hydroelectric facilities there weren't fish, but we had been told anecdotally there were fish, and lo and behold, we did find, we got positive hits for the presence of short-nosed sturgeon in those areas. And it's from Northfield, Massachusetts, all the way up to Bellows Falls, Vermont. It's a big chunk of river. It's a significant stretch of river that we now have affirmative data showing that we have an endangered species there. So what does that mean? Well, we've proven that the sturgeon are living in these areas and confirmed what our friends have been telling us. And for our advocacy purposes, we are now able to say to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration or the National US Fish and Wildlife Service, you have to begin consultation under the Endangered Species Act to make sure that we are preserving and protecting the habitat of this federally endangered species. So it's a game changer in terms of advocacy for the river, and it stimulates all kinds of additional work we could be doing. So this is Kate Buckman, our fisheries biologist, with her deep water crew, and in the far right is James Garner, a graduate student at the University of Massachusetts, who helped us complete the eDNA analysis. So this is an example of how science can help a nonprofit advocacy organization continue to restore and protect an important body of water. We also do a lot with community science and involving volunteers. So sea lamprey are grossly misunderstood, cute little creatures that are endemic. Yes, cute. They're our unofficial mascot, endemic to the Connecticut River, not endemic to the Great Lakes where they pose significant environmental problems, but yes, endemic to the Connecticut River, where they're important because they transport ocean nutrients up into freshwater systems when the adults come up in the spring to spawn and they die. All those nutrients go back into the systems and are of great help. So we are trying to foster sea lamprey recovery in the Connecticut River watershed. The sea lamprey are only parasitic when they're in the ocean in our system, and the seagoing fish are robust enough to handle the parasitic behavior of the sea lamprey. So you can see here, one of the hydroelectric facilities draws down a power canal per their license requirements every year, stranding everything in a large chunk of the power canal, and CRC organizes volunteers to go in and rescue the juvenile sea lampreys, which you can see in this little net here. And so this year we rescued 3,000 of these juvenile sea lamprey. Muddy, tiring, so exciting, this work that we do. And the sea lamprey are going on to be used in a Fish and Wildlife Service lab to study sea lamprey behavior so that we can help our friends in the Great Lakes avoid the problems they're causing there, but also encourage restoration of sea lamprey in the Connecticut River system. So we spent the better part of a day with these little tiny nets and big buckets walking through the muddy power canal, saving sea lamprey. We weren't so successful with mussels, unfortunately, because the power canal is drawn down for a while, but And we wish we didn't have to do it, but we did. And our friends at Fish and Wildlife Service are very grateful that we got them some individuals that they could do research with. The other piece of the community science work we do is that we ask volunteers to come help us look for sea lamprey nests or redds. Sea lamprey swim up and they love shallow, gravelly habitats in riffly conditions. So largely the males, but often the females will build their redds in sandy, gravelly substrate in shallow riffle conditions. And we are in the process of trying to survey all the tributaries to the Connecticut River to see where we have viable sea lamprey populations. And these are the names of some of the new rivers that we were able to survey this year, all in the great state of New Hampshire, where I am from. So this documents that they are getting through all these hydroelectric facilities. They are steadfastly making their way up through multiple dams, multiple old and ineffective or inefficient fish passage structures to get to the tributaries. So when I say that the restoration of the Connecticut River is really dependent on lots of people, this is what I mean. We've got community science volunteers who are helping us make our point. So citizen science is essentially crowdsourcing data, right? And the beauty of community science is that nearly everyone can help, right? If this looks like fun to you, you know, taking sticks and walking around in a creek, it's not everybody wants to do it or can do it, but nearly everyone can help. All observations matter in community science, very different from academic science. It's really a win-win for individuals and the community. And it's often, speaking as the executive director of a nonprofit that really relies on community engagement, it's really a vehicle for greater engagement with your place and with a mission of a nonprofit like CRC. So we also do, we remove a lot of these obsolete river obstructions. This past year, we removed 3 dams and 1 way undersized culvert, which is also an obsolete river obstruction. And we restored 13 miles of habitat for a wide variety of aquatic organisms. So as you probably know, we remove dams in order to increase the likelihood of the passage of aquatic organisms, to improve water quality, improve water temperature, to improve flood resilience, and in our case, public access. So I want to give you one example. This past summer in Bellows Falls, Vermont, we partner organizations of ours and community members identified one of the highest value sea lamprey nesting habitat sites in all of the Northeast. And unfortunately, it was blocked by a big defunct dam. So we scrambled to put together about $2 million worth of funding. We worked with community members, we worked with federal, state, and local partners. We worked with other NGOs, and we were able to remove the dam. So big change here before and after to enable sea lamprey to have additional great habitat for spawning. We also did a variety of community tours to explain why we did what we did. And we planted native trees and shrubs, which we always do. This land was donated to us. We in turn donated it to another nonprofit with the express condition that it be used for public access. So this private site is now being used for public access. And we have included some parking, some steps down, and this is a real example of why we do the work we do, and that quite frankly, we can't do it alone. So this is a picture of Dr. Davidson, and as he says, his girlfriend. It's a very funny YouTube video if you have a spare few moments to look at it. He was the first board president of the Connecticut River Conservancy, which was established in 1952, by the way, 20 years prior to the passage of the Clean Water Act. So there have been people concerned about the Connecticut River since, nearly ancient times, right? So Katharine Hepburn, in a famous documentary in the 60s, described the Connecticut River as the world's best landscaped cesspool. And Dr. Davidson and his wife did a boat tour from the upper reaches of the Connecticut down to the mouth of the Connecticut River to highlight the plight of the Connecticut River. And this obviously is a bit of a gag, although I have to tell you, I'm really excited about getting on some pearls and a gas mask and replicating this trip. and I think we may do that for our 75th anniversary, which is coming up in 2 years. So I've got the pearls, I just need the gas mask. So it was once the water quality was abominable. It was not fishable, it was not swimmable. So the Connecticut River Conservancy, as you can see, from Hanover, New Hampshire, down to the mouth of the Connecticut, has 80 sites at which we sample water quality, primarily for E. coli, although we've done cyanobacteria, PFAS, and microplastics as well. But for our conversation today, we have 80 sites throughout the watershed. Again, relying on community science, relying on volunteers to collect the samples, to bring them back to our lab so that we can analyze them. And so the blue here has passed our standards for both primary and secondary contact. In other words, fishing and wading and a direct dermal contact is primary contact. Boating, fishing is secondary contact, right? Not direct dermal contact with the water. All the blue on these particular sample dates in August of 24 at Haddam, which is down here. The data on the right show that everything was blue, safe for both secondary and primary contact. But you can see at the same time, all the red dots show it's not safe for either swimming or boating or fishing. And the yellow-ish dots show samples which pass standards for secondary contact, but not primary. So we have a website, Is It Clean or Está Limpio, in which we are posting this data in real time. So that if you want to know if it's safe for you to go swimming or boating or fishing, you can go to your area and see if it's what the data are showing. So again, we are relying on lots and lots of people gathering samples and bringing them to our lab in Greenfield, Massachusetts. And I'm happy to tell you, water quality is improving, right? The Connecticut River that I was leery of swimming in when I was in high school is now swimmable. So we participate in the Unified Water Study, and every regularly at dawn. We are sampling at the mouth of the Connecticut River. And in the Long Island Sound report card, went from a B minus, I believe, to an A+ this year. So water quality is improving, and the dam removals we are doing upstream and the restoration work we're doing upstream is having a measurable positive impact on water quality downstream. I will also say that the river goes both ways, right? We talked about the sea lamprey, and what happens downstream also affects the health of the river upstream. So it's not just that the river runs one direction, it's a bi-directional ecosystem. So we're measuring in this case for E. coli, and we've seen marked improvements. Now, after a rainstorm, a large rainstorm, I'm not sure I would recommend swimming in some parts of the river. We still have issues with combined sewer overflows, which are significant problems that are expensive and take a long time to resolve. And municipalities up and down the Connecticut are really making great steps to resolve it, largely with the help of federal monies. So challenges continue. We continue to have problems, significant problems with the Connecticut River watershed. They are not intractable, but we are seeing, as we've moved from having now primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment, we are seeing other issues crop up, right? PFAS and aquatic invasives, those kinds of issues are relatively new. The impacts of climate change on the ecosystems are significant and will require, I think, significant concerted effort to address. Our biodiversity loss is the second sort of existential threat facing the Connecticut River. We have hydro power facilities that are, many of them are trying to do the right thing, but it's expensive to do the right thing and it takes time. And not all of them are trying to do the right thing. So our advocacy work continues to be really important. Every year, CRC does a source to sea cleanup. This year, was our 28th year. And during the month of September, we organized cleanups up and down the river. We pulled, I think, 48,000 tons of trash from the river. We have lots and lots of community groups that help with that. And we are seeing the aquatic invasives march up the river, right? We thought that it was a Connecticut problem. Now it's a Massachusetts problem. Guess what? It's a New Hampshire and a Vermont problem now. So we are, as we watch where we live, as we love where we live, we are noticing new problems. You are probably aware that the last 2 Julys we've had catastrophic flooding in the upper watershed. Both July of 23 and July of 24, catastrophic flooding resulted in significant deleterious impacts to agricultural lands, loss of life, loss of buildings, loss of livelihoods. We have to be doing better and be thinking more proactively about how to build resilience into all our systems in the face of global climate change. So I want to thank you for your time. And in closing, I want to offer you 2 invitations. I want to invite you to engage with CRC in whatever way you want. We're always looking for field season staff in the summer, if that sounds interesting to you. There are also lots of ways to get involved where you live with community science and with nonprofits, so I encourage you to do that. And then finally, I'd like to invite you, if you want to take a paddle with me. My canoe from 1979 is still as beat up and beautiful as ever. So I invite you to come up and have a paddle with me, and we can swim in our river now. Thanks to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So our first two questions go to Brandon and Hanan. Hanan?
Hey, so I worked a little bit on invasive sea lamprey control in the Great Lakes a couple of years ago, and one thing that I thought was really funny was that some of the invasive sea lamprey technicians expressed a lot of I guess frustration at some of the dam removal projects because they had cited cases where the physical barrier was removed and a new population of invasives had established itself in waters that they hadn't had access to before. And obviously there's a lot of benefits to dam removal projects, they're enormously important. But I was curious if you or your organization had run into questions like this, not about sea lamprey, because obviously they're endemic to the Connecticut River, but just in general, if there's monitoring of aquatic invasives in these areas that now they have access to our dams.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the moral of your story is don't mess with Mother Nature, right? Which is sort of a byword from the 70s, I think. Those of us old enough to remember it will remember, don't mess with Mother Nature. The Great Lakes problem is we constructed all these wonderful canals to help move people and products through upstate New York and created a problem that didn't otherwise exist. When you remove dams, you do remove a barrier to passage of everything, right? You are also creating lots of benefits. We have not seen at CRC that any of our dam removals, which are on the tributaries, not on the main stem, have caused any increase in aquatic invasive intrusion into the area. What we did another dam removal. In the midst of the dam removal, we saw migratory fish making their way up through. So what we're mostly seeing is really positive impacts, and we haven't seen the negatives so far. But I can imagine if there's a dam in the somewhere within the geography of where sea lamprey are invasive, that would be a problem. So far, we've only seen net benefits from our dam.
Great question, Brandon.
Yeah, so when you started the presentation, you talked a little about the flood of the Sturgeon River, and then you referenced at one point getting some tribal leaders regarding the presence of the sturgeon. And we wonder if the organization there's any sort of organized efforts or something to integrate the community voices, particularly with some of the ecological restoration or the decisions to make there.
Yeah, that's a great question. To what extent are we working with Indigenous voices? So we have a proposal to remove 2 dams on the Green River in Massachusetts. One of the first conversations we had was with Indigenous community members in the area to say, what historic resources are there? What should we be mindful of? Would you like to be involved in this process? How can we be of help to you? And so they are involved in our proposal to NOAA under the bipartisan infrastructure law, BIL. We are the end of next week, hopefully. Where's real wood? Submitting a grant application to remove 3 dams in western Washington, and our tribal partners are right there with us. So, you know, the Connecticut River shows the history of conquest, right? And it also, we've been really good at extirpating, I should say that differently. We've been ruthless in extirpating native communities on the East Coast, which is why, in large measure, we have very few federally recognized tribes here. And that has led, our extirpation has led to tribal members going underground. They didn't, it was dangerous to be known as a member of a tribe. So it has only been relatively recently that there's been any sort of comfort level in tribal communities in engaging. And with luck, we'll continue to see more willingness to engage and willingness to help us. But we'll see, right? It's been a hard week.
Yeah.
So we have a question on Zoom from Alan Pickett. Alan, I'll read the question for you. That is, with respect to the short-nosed sturgeon eDNA portion of your talk, how can you be sure that the eDNA seen in the previously unstudied areas wasn't transported from upstream areas of the river?
So, good question. DNA degrades in aquatic environments with light, with temperature, with precipitation, with currents, with microbes, with nucleases, with acidity, and with time. So you have to sample where you think the fish are at a time when there isn't heavy flow, there hasn't been precipitation. And so the idea that the DNA could migrate upstream against current is a little hard to imagine. The hydroelectric facilities, in fact, sampled for eDNA for short-nosed sturgeon as part of the FERC relicensing process. And they did everything perfectly. They sampled at the surface during a high flow regime when there was precipitation. And guess what? They found nothing. Right? So we, realizing that the methodology of that study was deeply flawed, we scrambled and got the funding together to do our own study. So it's highly unlikely that the DNA would have come from anywhere but where we sampled. And James Gardner, our PhD student at UMass, is a free diver, and he went down deep, which is where the fish live. So, but good question.
Mary?
I heard a talk a few years ago about people trying to remove dams near Plymouth, in front of the herring, back up the rivers. And there was a lot of discussion about the design of fish ladders and, you know, the question of whether because you're leaving some of the dams in, the big dams are staying in. How are they getting how successful are those big dams in letting the migratory species uproot?
So highly contentious data point. How successful are these fish ladders? I will tell you that the fish ladders on the Connecticut River are called Denil fishways, DENIL. And that design was based on Pacific salmonid passage. And if you know anything about Pacific salmonids, you know they are short burst, strong swimmers. And so the fish passage that we have designed on the Connecticut is not targeted to the fish species we have in the Connecticut River. There is very interesting work being done right now at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Fish Lab in Turners Falls, Massachusetts, to, and they have a huge facility with, where they can demo fish ladder design. And there's very promising data, from a new kind of fish ladder that instead of channelizing the water and making it move at high velocity, tends to create eddies. So they're putting in bumper structures that will create a little eddy for the fishes to swim into, rest for a moment, and then make the next jump. There's also a fish elevator at the Holyoke Dam, and that's reliant on somebody watching the screen to see when enough fish swim into what's essentially a large fish tank, and then the fish tank is carried up and the fish are released on the other side. So
Yeah, I was watching migratory herring last spring and they were all collecting below one of the little walls and then just sitting there and they were like packed in like sardines. And little kids came with nets and essentially lifted them into the pot, and I don't know whether that's. Potentially you could lift the bad things in as well, but that's how they were getting into.
you can, so, yeah, the blueback herring and the river herring is another conversation altogether. Many of our dam removals are targeted for river herring, because it used to be that the tributaries and the Connecticut was, as you said, black with fish, right, or dark with fish. And that hasn't happened, in large part because of trawling activity in Long Island Sound. So we have been involved in advocacy work around temporal and spatial closures of the trawl fishery in Long Island Sound to allow the river herring to come back up. And we've seen huge success with that off the coast of Maine, for example, where the river herring are able, the population will rebound, but you just have to lay off for a little bit. So. Yes.
What do you know about striped bass spawning in the Connecticut River and other tidal rivers in Connecticut?
Anecdotally, we haven't looked at that in particular, but the Connecticut River is tidal up north of Hartford, so up to Windsor Locks, where Bradley Airport is. So you think about the airport, you know, the beacon of transportation in our century is also where the tidal flow ends, which was the beacon of transportation in past centuries, right? We had sailing vessels up that far, riding the tide. So we know that the stripers are coming in to the estuarine ecosystems at the mouth of Long Island Sound. To what extent they are, their populations are doing well or doing poorly, I don't know, because we haven't looked at it. We're a nonprofit. 75% of our budget is grant funded. And the majority of that is federally grant funded. We're doing, as you can see, we're doing a lot of work to help our partners in U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Nobody's asked us to look at that yet.
Well, I just did, so there you go.
Great.
But the thing is that they're doing very, very badly in the Chesapeake, their
Yeah.
major spawning ground, because it's getting too warm there. And they're starting to infest the rivers in southern Canada. So it'd be interesting to track and see if new spawning or more spawning is starting to happen north of the Chesapeake and north of the Hudson. There are other known main spawning areas.
Yeah.
I would think Fish and Wildlife would be very interested.
You would think, and if they had money or the ability to get it to nonprofits. We are seeing lots of temperature related issues in the Connecticut River. I'll give you a personal example. On a pond in New Hampshire, where I have been going with my little beat up canoe since I was in high school. There have always been loons who hatch out the weekend of July 4th for 45 years. That's when they hatch out, the weekend of July 4th. And, you know, those of us who are concerned about the loons are always like, oh, there's so many boats, what are we gonna do? This year, those loons hatched out on Juneteenth, June 19th, more than 2 weeks early. So that's, you know, an avian example. We are seeing lots of increases in water temperature that are affecting, in particular, the migration of American shad in the Connecticut River. But stay tuned. It's, you know, it's not getting better anytime soon. Dam removal will help, but this is why we need to begin to build resilience into our systems a little bit better.
So I had a question about the whole dam removal. Don't you need like permits?
Oh, God,
and
do
like,
you ever?
and exactly, and are you just really successful in getting these permits, or are like the agencies just like, oh, thank you so much for doing this for us, here's your permit, or how does it?
Well,
How does it
so we're in 4 states. And each state has a different permitting structure. So we have done most of our dam removals in Vermont because our restoration director lives there, but it's also the easiest place to get a permit because the state environmental agency views dam removal as an improvement to water quality. And so we can go in with big yellow machines into the water after spawning season and remove the obsolete river obstruction. Whereas in New Hampshire, they view that as an adverse impact to water quality. And so we have to build cofferdams and reroute water, pump it and pipe it around the area of excavation, which adds time, money, and permitting hassles. And I won't even talk about what it takes in Connecticut. In Massachusetts, it's often a 3-year process to get the permitting. It can be that long to get the funding. Doing these dam removals is not inexpensive. We are looking for ways to streamline the process. In Massachusetts. One of our dam removals this summer was an emergency dam removal. The dam was in really bad shape and everybody knew it. And we set a land speed record of identifying the problem, getting engineering studies done, and securing funding and removing the dam all in a year because of the threat it posed to downstream populations. That's often rare. And yes, mostly our partners in state and federal agencies are like, you go, yes, you get another one. But they also have to abide by the strictures put in place that are different state to state.
I was curious if you faced any like community pushback against dam, because it was like just like a town is like really attached to like that pond, like doing or like that pool of water being like a recreation area. Yeah, like if you had to like educate them about that.
So one of the dams we are currently trying to remove, what we are trying to get funding to remove on the Green River in Massachusetts is a timber crib frame dam. And the Historic Commission loves this dam because it's part of a really important industrial heritage in this town. And once you lose an historic structure, it's gone forever. So what we have tried to explain to them is that's part of the human history, partial human history. We have a natural history and an indigenous history that's equally as important as the industrial history. And furthermore, your timber frame dam is really no longer what you think it is, because in the 30s, they came along and dumped concrete in And it's now not, it's no longer the historical artifact that you think. And we'll sweeten the pot, we'd love to have to take those timbers out, rebuild them on the site of a river access trail and explain to people what used to be here
Mhm.
and why it was important and the industrial heritage that it brought to this area. So yes, often there's a lot of pushback. We find mostly that's cured by educational activities, but you know, not so many months ago, I was treated as rudely as I've ever been treated. And you heard from my bio, I was an environmental litigator, so you can imagine how rudely I was treated. I was treated very poorly for suggesting we remove this important historical cultural artifact. So it has taken time, it has taken months, and now the Historical Commission is writing a letter of support. So I think once people realize that we're all in this together and that the benefit to the community will outweigh the loss of this historic structure, they're generally on board. But it's a rate determining step for us. We have to have willing dam owners to be able to do this work.
Great.
So I've left some pamphlets in the back, some window stickers, easy on, easy off, and feel free to grab that. And I look forward to. I understand I'm supposed to eat lunch before you do, so I'll run there because I know that's why you're all here.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.